I definitely am in my dark red era. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Knee Knits. My name is Amy, and here I talk about all things knitting, and today is podcast episode number 23. In today's episode, I'll be sharing with you guys one finished object that I recently completed, all of the progress updates on my whips, and I also have a few new cast-ons to share with you guys. As you can see, I am wearing my zipper sweater. This is the first time I'm wearing the zipper sweater here in a podcast episode. It's one of my more recent finished objects. I'm hoping I don't get too hot while filming, but it's really nice to wear. I knit this out of Lana Peruvian Highland wool in the color charcoal, held with Lana Tilia, which is their silk mohair, in the color black. Really like the fabric, really like the fit, and it's just a really practical winter wear and fall wear. So let's just hop into the projects. I do have one finished object and one pretty finished object, but it's not fully finished, and you'll see why in just a little bit. But the first thing I have to share is my weekend hat. I just started this last episode. It was just a little strip of 1x1 ribbing, but I really, knit it up over the last week. I was just eager to finish it and to wear it. So the weekend hat is a pattern by Petite Knit. It is an all over 1x1 ribbed beanie. It is double folded, which makes a triple layer brim. So this is actually what it looks like before you fold it up. So you can see it's a very lengthy beanie. The yarn that I used is Bright DK by Night Bright Yarn Co. in the color Starfish from the Under the Sea collection. It's a hand-dyed yarn, 100% superwash merino, and the yarn was gifted to me. So I think most people have heard of the weekend hat and how it works, but just in case you haven't, it is all 1x1 rib, but there are two lines of double knitting. Right here is the first one, and then right here is the second one. It's kind of difficult to see on the outside, but if you flip the hat inside out, you can more clearly see those double knitted lines here. You can see sort of the fold that it makes, and that just helps with the folding of the hat to give it a cleaner, assembly per se. So you can see right there and right there. And I was kind of nervous if this hat would be a drag to knit because it is so much 1x1 ribbing. As you can see here, it's just really long. I didn't know if it would get boring or tedious, but I actually did not find that at all. I found this hat to be very engaging, which is probably why I finished knitting it so quickly, because it was really fun. And I think the double knitting rows help with that because it kind of divides up the knitting into sections. It gives you a smaller goal to reach. Like getting to this first section seems pretty manageable, and then once you get to the next section, you just have to knit that much to get to the next double knitting round, and it's just one of those things in knitting that keeps it engaging rather than just a straight 14-inch long 1x1 ribbed tube. So I really liked knitting this, and I think also the fact that this is in variegated yarn also made it very engaging because the colors were changing, and it was really fun to see the fabric sort of develop. I wonder if I would have maybe a more tedious time if this was a solid color yarn. But I really like how it turns out. As you could see there, it was pretty quick and easy for me to fold it up just because of the double knitting. I think it's interesting. It doesn't naturally fold exactly on the double knitting lines. Like you can kind of see where the bump is there, which I think from far away you can't really tell. I feel like for me, I kind of want it to sit more naturally here, but the fold kind of just rolls past it. But once you're wearing it, you can't really tell. So let me try it on and show you guys. So I knit this to pattern. I knit the size medium, which is supposed to fit my head, which has a 22-inch circumference. And I didn't gauge swatch. I don't really gauge swatch with my hats. I don't know, I just feel like I just want to get into knitting the hats, and if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't fit, I'll give it away to someone who it would fit. But this is the size medium on 3.5mm needles, and this is the final fit. I didn't do any mods. I knit it exactly to pattern. I ended up using 114 grams of the DK weight yarn, so a little bit more than one skein to get this full shape. And I really like it. I think it looks really good. You can see it has sort of that like conical shape with the point at the top, but it's not too pointy. It's also not too round. The ribbing feels very grippy. It's a very snug fitting hat. In fact, when I was knitting it and trying it on and as I was knitting it, I felt like I was concerned that it was going to be too small because it was really tight. And when I finished knitting it before blocking, it was very snug on my head. In fact, it was so snug that I wore it after finishing it, but before blocking, and it was kind of naturally sliding up off my head because it just wanted to squeeze in more. But then I blocked it and it did stretch out a little bit and definitely helped with the sizing and fit. It does not feel that snug anymore. I've also worn it out for just one day, and that was enough to sort of give it more stretch, and I feel like the more I wear it, the more it will sort of mold to my head shape, which I find with most hats that I knit. It takes a couple wears for them to sort of break in, and then they sort of fit really well. They stretch out to where they need to be stretched, so I think the medium was a good size for me. As I was knitting it, I was concerned if maybe I should have knit the large, but so far this medium seems pretty good. The only thing I don't love about this hat is when it's cold outside. I'm kind of wearing it sort of for looks right now. My ears are exposed, but if I'm wearing it outside for the cold, I'm definitely going to pull it over my ears like this to really keep it warm. And I feel like I don't love how the top looks when it's fully pulled down. You can kind of see how it like squeezes around my head and then it just kind of like doesn't. And it kind of has like a weird point. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it kind of like, see the roundness and then it just stops and then it goes up. It's like right there. I don't love that. And if I'm being nitpicky, I would choose not to knit the same exact hat because of that. So again, I don't know if it just needs to like stretch out a little bit more, or if I did knit a bigger size, it wouldn't be so tight on the top of my head. So that's just something to think about with the weekend hat and the ribbing, whereas a stockinette hat might not have the same effect. Like I don't really have that same thing going with the Oslo hat. It just kind of like puffs at the top in a more natural shape, but that's just me being nitpicky. I still really love the hat. I'm definitely gonna wear it and can see myself knitting this again, either as gift knits or just if I need another beanie in maybe a more staple color. This is definitely a statement color, but I really like it. I did mention before that I used 114 grams of DK weight yarn, which if you're buying a lot of DK weight yarn is sold either in 100 gram skeins or 50 gram balls. And it's kind of annoying to buy 3 50-gram balls or 2 100-gram skeins and only use just a little bit of that last skein. So I definitely think you could squeeze this size medium out of 2 balls of 50 grams, which would be 100 grams of yarn. I think you would just need to shorten the brim sections. Like, I think this is supposed to be about 4 inches, so maybe if you did each brim section just 3 inches, that would give you enough to finish the crown out of 100 grams without needing that other ball of yarn and still having pretty much the same effect. You would just have a thinner brim. Of course, you could totally do just a single folded brim as well with well under 100 grams of yarn. So that's also an option if you're looking for, something that you need to stash bust with. This is definitely a great pattern option. And that's everything about my weekend hat. All right, my next finished object is basically a finished object, but not really, because it's my Whitmoor cardigan, and you might be able to guess that it's not finished because I don't have buttons yet. I always buy my buttons after I finish knitting it because I like bringing the sweater with me to look at the buttons on the sweater, also making sure that they fit the buttonhole sizes. So that's why I don't have any buttons yet, but everything else within this cardigan is finished. So this is the Whitmoor cardigan by Amy Loudon. I've been working on this for a bit. The last time you saw this, I had finished the body and had to do the sleeves. So the sleeves are finished. There's one sleeve, there's the other, and I have blocked this. So let's talk about the updates. First, some quick basics on this pattern. I knit the size extra small on 4.5mm needles. I am doing the short length with the tapered sleeves because you have options for either a longer length or bishop sleeves within the pattern. The yarn that I used is Sorella DK in the color Townhouse, which is from their Autumn in New York collection. And I knit this pretty much to pattern, but I did do some mods here at the bottom, which I do want to talk about because I totally forgot to mention them last episode with the body. So in the pattern, the ribbing at the bottom is a lot shorter. I think it's only about 13 rounds or rows of ribbing, and I wanted it to look longer. I just like the look of longer ribbing, so I did 18 rows of ribbing, and then I did a tubular bind off. So after the 18 rows of ribbing, I did 4 rows of double knitting, and then I did the sewn bind off to give this nice tubular bind off hem. The pattern does just ask you to bind off in pattern, so that was one mod I made. Another mod I made was eliminating any decreases right before the ribbing hem. The pattern does call for doing a few decreases in that last row of stockinette before you get into the ribbing. I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want any cinching of the ribbing. I wanted it to lay flat, one line here, which you can see. So I didn't do any decreases, just went straight into the ribbing. I did do the length to pattern because there are evenly spaced buttonholes that you knit throughout the whole body of the cardigan, so it doesn't give you a lot of option to vary the length unless you do it precisely at like an evenly spaced buttonhole. So I had considered doing this shorter because I wanted sort of like a cropped fit right at the waist, but if I had cast off after the second to last buttonhole right here, I think it just would have been too short for my liking, so I just had no choice but to go on and do the second buttonhole or the final buttonhole as it was written in the pattern. Now, if I was really good at planning ahead of time, I could have kind of figured out what length I wanted and then readjusted the buttonhole spacing throughout the whole cardigan body, but I was not that good at planning ahead, didn't want to put in that sort of effort or do the math to do that. So this is exactly the short length as it is written in the pattern. It does hit at about my waist, definitely a little bit past it, maybe more at my hip bone, which I definitely like. It's definitely a good length where I can tuck it into high-waisted bottoms if I want to. It's just not super cropped. Now for the sleeves, I did the tapered sleeves option, and I do have a couple comments on the pattern with the tapered sleeves. I think they are really thin. Like they taper a lot, and when I mean thin, I mean like tight on the arm. So I was following the directions for the tapered decreases, which you can see go along right here, and I was maybe about 3/4 of the way through the tapered decreases, and then I tried on the sleeve and it was really tight. It was already like kind of suctioning onto my arm, which I didn't really want a sleeve to be like super tight on my arm. I kind of wanted it, tapered but not skin tight. So I actually stopped decreasing about 3 or 4 repeats before I was supposed to, because that would have just given me a sleeve that was extremely tight. And I did read on some project pages on Ravelry that other people experienced the same thing, that the decreases and the stitch count for the sleeves was just way too tight for their liking. So my final sleeve circumference has 44 stitches. If I had followed the pattern, I would have ended up with, I think, 36 stitches. So I have 8 more stitches than the pattern calls for, which, would have given me a sleeve like this is it now. But if I had actually decreased out those 8 stitches, probably would have been like this, which is so small. I don't know who has a wrist this small, but would not have fit me at all. So that's what I did. The length of the sleeve, I actually ended up knitting it to the length described in the pattern, and they're way too long. I should have shortened them like I shortened all my sleeves. I don't know what I was thinking, but right now, if I pull the sleeve and not scrunch it up, it definitely goes over my hand, and it's just a little bit too long. It goes to my fingertips. So I might have to go back and redo the sleeves. Another reason I might have to go back and redo the sleeves is because I have this weird bubble here, which you might be able to see, you might not be able to see, but if you look at the shaping, do you see how it kind of bows out here? Yeah, so I was hoping that maybe you wouldn't be able to see that when I had the sweater on, but you can. And I know the reason why it's doing that. So if you recall, another mod that I made to this cardigan was adding short rows to it before I split for sleeves, because there's no short row shaping in this pattern at all. I wanted to add some to raise the back neck. So I did very long short rows that extended across the whole, almost the whole circumference of the cardigan before splitting for sleeves. It covered about 75% of the circumference of the cardigan, and because the short rows go across the sleeves, I now have a wedge of extra rows at the sleeves that cause this little like bubble. Now, this is my first time kind of experimenting with adding short rows. I've actually never knit a circular yoke pattern with short rows at the sleeve split point before, so I don't know if pattern designers normally have a strategy to combat those like extra rounds of rows that end up in the sleeves. So I don't know if there was a way for me to do more short rows when I cast it on for the sleeves to sort of do like an opposite wedge and sort of negate out those extra rows and make it more even. But there's like a bubble here and I don't really like it. And I think in combination with the fact that the sleeves are really tight, it makes it more exaggerated. Maybe if the sleeves were looser, it would look more natural because it would be, you know, kind of bubbly out here, but then also have like bagginess at the underarm. So I can't tell if I'm gonna have the motivation to go back and redo the sleeves anytime soon. Maybe I'll just sort of sit on it and see if I don't like wearing it to the point where I need to redo it, or maybe I can just put up with it and think that no one's really gonna notice and that it's fine as is, and it's just gonna go down as one of those projects that, you know, I experimented with. It wasn't 100% successful, maybe it was like 85% successful, which is a passing grade for me to wear. But with all that, I will say that blocking really transformed this piece. You know, I knew blocking was gonna transform it because it's lace, and you can see how nicely the lace pattern opened up. It's nice and flat, there's no bunching. The blocking also helped a lot with the tension within the stockinette, because I was knitting this with frogged yarn, so it was really like bumpy and uneven, and it looks really good now. And last episode I talked about how I didn't really like the striping too much with the variegated yarn or the tonal yarn. I thought it was like too obvious of like back and forth stripes, which you can kind of see here on the sleeve as well. But I think after blocking, it looks a lot better. I'm no longer like upset about the coloring. I think it looks more like a good tonal knit rather than something with a lot of stripes, which hopefully you guys agree. If you don't agree, well, again, this is just the way this sweater is going to look. But I'm really happy with how it blocked out. You know, the ribbing looks really nice. It has a lot of drape. The yarn and fabric is really nice. I'm really a fan of this superwash DK weight yarn. I think I'm kind of going through a phase where I'm deciding whether or not I like DK weight superwash yarn or just any superwash yarn for garments, because I usually knit with natural fibers that don't have superwash treatment, and I love those. And I feel like with superwash there's a lot more to think about. You have to think about how much it grows when it's blocked. You have to think about how it's not going to have as much structure, so you have to sort of think about that application in your patterns. Like, it's going to have more drape and kind of more sagginess and maybe stretch out more over time, so you have to sort of think about how that will affect your project in the future. But I'm really impressed with this yarn. I really like the color. I really like how it feels. It doesn't feel like plasticky to me. It doesn't feel stretchy or springy in a way that's uncomfortable to me that I have experienced with other superwash wools. I think more specifically with commercial superwash wools, I find that I don't like those that much. But this is like a hand-dyed superwash. I don't know where most hand dyers get their bases, but I find that they're a lot nicer than commercially produced superwash yarns. I will talk about how much yarn I used for this project. So I ended up using less than 4 skeins to finish this, which I was surprised. I thought I was going to have to break into a fifth, but I ended up with about 10 or 15 grams left over of my 4th skein of yarn. So used just under 400 grams for this size extra small. So I did buy 5 skeins of this townhouse color, so now I have a whole extra skein, which would be really nice for an accessory project, maybe a beanie, maybe a weekend hat, since I have 15 grams of that 4th skein. So there's exactly the yardage I need for a weekend hat. So yeah, I'm really impressed with the color and the yarn, and impressed with the amount of knitting I got out of 4 skeins of yarn. So we'll definitely talk more about this cardigan as a finished piece and how I like wearing it once I add the buttons in the next episode. I'm gonna give myself a deadline of 2 weeks to go out and get the buttons and sew them on, because if I don't give myself a deadline, I'm gonna put it off. So I promise you guys, episode 24 will have a finished Whitmoor cardigan. All right, we'll get into my next project, which is the Lana Vest by Irene Lynn. So I have it right here. Here's my status update. I have since finished the back. Last time you saw this, it was just the back portion, and then I finished the back, and then you pick up the front shoulders at each point. You do them separately, and then you connect in the round, and that is where I am at today. I actually just connected this in the round last night. I was getting close, and I just knew I had to finish it and connect it in the round before I could put it down for the evening. So that's where I am right now. The yarn that I'm using is originally Lovely Lana, which is an Aran Weight Andean Highland wool. This is in the color Merlot. I'm really enjoying knitting with this yarn. It has great texture. Really love the color, of course, and it's just really nice. Aran Weight, knitting this on 5mm needles, which is kind of chunky for me, definitely on the larger size in terms of yarn and gauge, but this is knitting up quite well. The goal of this project is to have a nice, oversized, all over textured slip over. I kind of want to wear it for Thanksgiving with my family at the end of the month, and I think I'll be able to finish it by then. Although this is a chunkier knit for me, it's not going as quickly as I kind of expected it to go. I think it's just because of all of the cabling and the texture. You know, if this was stockinette, I would be flying through this, but the cables definitely slow me down. I also still don't have a cable needle. If you recall, I broke my cable needle a while ago and have honestly just been way too lazy to go to the store and get a new one. I don't know why, so I've kind of been using a crochet hook to sort of help me rearrange the stitches and knit the cables. I was trying to do the cables without a cable needle, and with this yarn and just the tension and how many cables there are, I just wasn't really able to do that as successfully as I have been in the past. So using a crochet hook to help me out, maybe next time I'll have a new cable needle, but we'll see. I've been really enjoying all the texture in this knit. I've been definitely on a texture kick lately, been enjoying cables and charts and all of that. And this pattern is both charted and written out. Although I will say I find the pattern a little bit difficult to follow. So I prefer reading charts rather than reading the written out instructions, but the written out instructions don't really tell you when to look at the chart. They just are the written instructions, and then the charts are sort of put at the end of the pattern if you need them or want them. And I find it kind of hard to follow the written out instructions without knowing when to go look at the chart versus when to look at the written instructions for specific rows. But besides that, I feel like the pattern is pretty, not easy to follow, but if you are comfortable with charted and written out patterns, this is kind of just your standard, lots going on. There's a lot of text on the page, but it's nothing too difficult to follow if you have the experience. I kind of been waving this around, but let me show you guys the texture of it close up because it is really pretty. So you do have these braided cables that go down either side. This is the back that I'm showing you. In the middle, you have this panel of knit and purls that makes this cool diamond pattern. There are some smaller cables along the sides, and then most of the side panels are double moss stitch. And actually, I haven't gotten to this part yet, but right below the underarm, so like down here, is going to be another cabled section, which I think will be really cool and a nice professional look. Now the front is a v-neck. It's not the deepest v-neck, it's actually a pretty shallow v-neck, which you can see here. It'll kind of lay on me like this. if you can see it. It got really dark in the camera, but this is definitely closer to the natural color of the yarn rather than when I hold it up here. It definitely gets a little bit brighter just so the camera can focus on it. But the V-neck is pretty shallow, but just your standard V. You know, you have your armholes down here. I'm excited for this slip over shaping because it's definitely going to be oversized. I kind of want it to hang off of my shoulder like it looks in the pattern photo. I only have one slip over currently, and it's my Friday slip over V-neck, and I love that thing. It's really fun to wear, but it's not as big and oversized as I would have preferred. I didn't know it when I was knitting that one that I prefer oversized slip overs, but after I finished that one, I was like, I like this, but it would be cuter if it was bigger. So I'm glad that this is going to be a pretty big oversized sweater slip over on me. I am doing the first size, which corresponds with my bust measurement, and with the cables this is unblocked, so it's definitely going to stretch out more once it's blocked. I find cables really grow after blocking. They're definitely really tight as you're knitting them. I don't know if I have much more to say about this vest. I will probably not go and do the V-neck edging or the armhole edging until I need to break for a new ball of yarn. I still have a pretty decent amount. This is the second ball of yarn that I kind of just started. Maybe I'm like halfway through it, but I don't really like to cut yarn if I don't need to, so I'm just going to keep going with the body and then add the armholes when I have to start my third ball of yarn, which I think will definitely give a really good visual for what this is going to look like in the end. I am knitting this as part of a mini knit along with Venetia from the Woolly Worker here on YouTube and Flaminia from the Knitting Phlegm also here on YouTube, so definitely check out their projects. I know that Venetia has gone and done the V-neck edging. I think Flaminia has as well, so you can check out their Instagrams and YouTubes to see what their progress is on the vest. I think it's really fun to knit along with other people and sort of just like text about it and text updates, and it sort of motivates to keep the project going, and it's a lot of fun to see other people's versions of the same project. All right, we'll move on to the next project, and let me go grab it. Okay, so my next project is a new cast on. I cast it on pretty recently after I filmed the last podcast, because in the last podcast I shared how I got this yarn from the Sorella Taylor Swift Eras collection. This is the color red, and I had mentioned how I wanted this to make a shawl for Christmas time. And then I wasn't going to cast it on, but I had this realization that it's going to be November, and it is November now, and if I want to wear this during Christmas time, like throughout the month of December, I have to cast it on now so it can be done soon. So it was kind of like a panic cast on because I just didn't realize the time of the year and how I needed to work on this project. So I have since cast it on the Boho Blush Shawl by Andrea Mowry. So the Boho Blush Shawl I was drawn to because it has this like crescent moon shape that you can see. It's very long and not too wide or deep, or whatever that dimension of the shawl is called. And I figured it could be worn like a scarf. I definitely am more of a scarf wearer than a shawl wearer. So I kind of like how this has dual purpose. It kind of just like wraps around like this. I think will look really nice. So the construction of this shawl is at the starting point here. You do a garter tab cast on, which helps prevent a little hole here as you increase outward on either side. Was written in the pattern, pretty easy to follow. It didn't really say that the start was a garter stitch cast on. You just kind of follow the pattern and you realize that you are doing a garter stitch cast on. Garter stitch tab cast on. I kept forgetting to say the word tab, but hopefully you guys were following. But after you do the garter stitch tab cast on, you immediately go into a section of garter stitch, which is really relaxing and meditative because it's just all knitting, increasing at either side while you continue the sort of garter stitch border here that you can see. Now, I like this shawl because it has different sections that keep this knitting very engaging. So you kind of just want to keep knitting to get to the next section. So like you're in the garter stitch section, but there's like a clear end point where you move into the next one, and you just want to keep going to get to the next section. So following the garter stitch section at the beginning, you then go into brioche. then there's more garter stitch, and then there's some fan and feather lace, which is really pretty, more garter stitch, and then it's actually going to alternate between the brioche, garter lace, brioche, garter lace, brioche. It's not too many times because, like I said, it's not a very deep shawl, but I think there's just 2 or 3 repeats of each. And I've made so much more progress on this than I expected to, just because it's been so engaging. And you can kind of see that sort of crescent moon shape here. I'm really liking how the red yarn is knitting up. There is so much dimension and texture in the color, and the brioche was really fun. So this is my very first time knitting brioche, and I think it was a very good introduction to it because it was just this very small strip of brioche. The pattern was definitely difficult for me to read at first. Those like acronyms for the brioche knitting stitches are not for the faint of heart to learn what they mean, but I think it turned out pretty good. I can totally see now the appeal to knitting brioche because it is so squishy and it was also just really fun to knit. I had a great time with it. And I'm excited to get to the next brioche section, which is making me continue to work on this. I also realized I think I might have been showing you the wrong side of the lace. There is, the right side of the lace here. It's also been really fun. This is my first time doing the fan and feather lace pattern. I love how it kind of makes a natural sort of waviness into the garter stitch sections that it surrounds. It's just a fun little added texture. I will say the fan and feather lace was not nearly as fun as the brioche. I felt like it was a little bit tedious and definitely hard in general to count stitches with both the brioche and the lace sections. It's definitely the sort of thing where I'm just knitting each section, and then when I get to the end of it and I have to count my stitches, I'm holding my breath to make sure that I have the correct stitch count. But it's been going pretty well so far. Haven't made any mistakes with the stitch count yet, so that is good. I am knitting this on 3.5mm needles. Didn't gauge swatch just because, I don't know, it's a shawl. I feel like I didn't really need to gauge swatch. I knew that the 3.5mm needles would be fine with the fingering weight yarn. Just a little bit more about this yarn. It is 100% superwash merino. It's 2-ply, and the colors are just so nice. I mean, look at that. It's like more variegation than a tonal, but it's not super variegated, so it's just making a really nice fabric that I think looks really good, looks really Christmassy, but also it's not really going to look Christmassy when it's not Christmas time. It's just a nice standard dark red that I really like. I do know the one mod that I will be making to this shawl is eliminating the fringe. I'm not going to do the fringe that is in the pattern. You can see here in the pattern photo that there's fringe all along the edge. It's just not really my style, so I'm not going to do that. But other than that, I am going to follow this to pattern and can't wait to see how it looks when it's all done. I definitely am in my dark red era. Not upset about it. I think both of these colors are really fun and not something that I've really knit with before. Okay, one more project to share with you guys. It is also a new cast on and has a little bit of a preamble before I show it to you guys. So I have been sitting on some yarn that I ordered earlier in the year from Woolberry Fiber Co.'s Caboose collection. This is the color Rabbit Rump, which is this really nice, mostly white, but it has black speckles and sort of like a gray wash throughout. And I purchased this kind of with the intention to make the Lento sweater. The Lento sweater is knit on 6mm needles. People really like it because it knits up really quickly, and it's just a staple stockinette raglan piece. You hold a fingering weight yarn, which is this here, with a Surrey. So I also got some undyed Surrey from Birch and Lily, which is just this really nice sort of off-white color, a pretty good pairing for this. And I was going to cast on the Lento, so I swatched, and here is my gauge swatch. So 6mm needles with the Surrey and the fingering weight held together, and it's not a bad swatch. I just didn't love it. I don't know. I knit it up, I blocked it, I let it dry, and then I was like, am I gonna knit this Lento? I feel like the large gauge is not doing the speckle yarn justice. Like, this is really pretty, and I don't know, I just feel like this swatch, it just looks too plain. The stitches are too spread out, so all of the speckling is really spread out, and this is really nice hand-dyed yarn that I want to utilize well, and I just don't think that the Lento is it. I still would love to knit a Lento in the future, but I'm thinking maybe more with like a solid color would look better and maybe be a better use of the yarn rather than something speckled where, the suri is like hiding some of the speckles and it's just too spaced out for my liking. So I decided I was not going to do the Lento with this yarn. Another positive aspect of the Lento is that it uses very little yarn compared to other sweaters knit at a smaller gauge. So supposedly you're supposed to be able to knit a sweater with like 2 to 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn. And I bought a lot more than that for this woolberry yarn, and same with the suri because I just wanted extra. So it's not like I was needing to squeeze a sweater out of a small quantity of yarn, which I think maybe in the future if I pick another yarn for the Lento I would purposely get less, but I have the yarn here to make a smaller gauge sweater. So I was like, let me just see what that yarn looks like knit on 4mm needles at sort of a DK weight gauge, which is a common gauge that I knit a lot of sweaters out of. So here it is, and I think it looks really good. I was definitely more pleased with how the speckling was laying out and how the gray, you can sort of see the gray was laying out there. And I just was more happy with this fabric. I think it does the yarn more justice, and that sort of opened up the opportunity to look for a new pattern to knit with this, because there are so many patterns to knit with, either a fingering weight and a mohair or just a DK weight on 4mm needles. So then I went pattern searching. I went into my Instagram saves and I had saved this sweater by Second Knit. It's called the Ollie Sweater. It's a pretty new pattern and I really liked it because it just looked really comfortable and slouchy, and the one thing that sold me on it was the 2x2 rib. I'm definitely in a 2x2 ribbed phase. Although I haven't knit anything with 2x2 rib recently, I think a lot of my winter knits are going to feature 2x2 ribbing. So I really like that. Also, the Instagram photo is in this nice Peer Gynt tweed, and I feel like this speckled yarn kind of resembles the same kind of tweed style. So I could totally see myself knitting up this sweater in this yarn. So I ended up casting it on just last night. So yes, long story short, my latest project is the Ollie Sweater by Marita Harvey, who's also known as Second Knit. And there's not much to show you guys right now. It is a drop shoulder with pretty, standard drop shoulder construction. You start with the back, you do the back, and then you pick up for the front shoulders, and then you connect them, and then you connect in the round under the arms, and yada, yada, yada. So this is the back so far. The back shaping is done with German short rows, which I have done once before. It's the same beginning of the Moby sweater, although you do start with a provisional cast on, which I don't think the Moby sweater started with a provisional cast on. So you'll have to ignore the really bright neon turquoise and orange yarn here because that is my crochet provisional cast on chain yarn. Not part of the sweater, but provisionally cast on. You can see I'm kind of in the middle of a row, and I'm sorry it's so curled, it's really hard to see, but there is the back shoulder shaping that I am still working on but almost finished with, and I really like how the fabric is knitting up. You can still see the speckles. They are definitely still kind of washed out with the suri, but I really like how you can see those like washes of gray come through the fabric, and I think overall as like a big sweater, it's going to be a pretty neutral everyday wear sweater. So I'm excited to see how it knits up, and of course excited to wear it. And that brings us to the end of all of my works in progress. So we'll move on. I have one small acquisition to share, and I'm also going to share the giveaway winners for the books. Okay, into the last section of today's episode, I have one acquisition to share with you guys. So last weekend was the Boston Fiber Festival that I attended. It was really fun, even though it was rainy. It was really nice to meet the vendors. There were a ton of vendors for yarn, fiber, finished knitted objects. There was It was hosted by Boston Fiber Company, so their store, of course, was open and had a lot going on. I think they also had a spinning class in conjunction with the Fiber Festival, which I didn't attend, but seems like a really cool event. We'll definitely try to go back next year if they host it again. And while I was there, I picked up this sock set. This is a Christmas-themed sock set by Honey and Quill Fiber Co., which is a Boston-based dyer, and this yarn is called Merry Mary. And I just couldn't resist it. I just love things that are holiday themed. And what drew me to this sock set was that these colors are Christmassy, but they're not the like traditional like dark red, dark green Christmas. I kind of like how it's like the lighter lime green with like the red that kind of blends into pink, and this turquoise just, it's really cool. Like, it's a combo I would never expect. You definitely look at this yarn and you can tell that it's Christmas themed, but it's not in your face Christmas. So I really liked it. Picked it up, of course. You can see I have it here. It also comes with this mini skein in this nice sort of neon green that coordinates with the green in the yarn skein. So I'm excited to knit this up. I think Honey and Quill is coming out with a Christmas or holiday themed collection, so be sure to follow them on Instagram for updates. I think at the Fiber Festival this was like a sneak preview, so I got this ahead of time, which is exciting. This is a classic nylon sock set, so it's 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. The 100 gram skein has 437 yards. The mini skein is 20 grams and has 87 yards. So I like how this is a 4-ply yarn because I'm definitely team 4-ply yarn now for socks. I don't think I'll be purchasing any 2-ply yarn in my future for socks. I just have not really been enjoying how they wear too much. I feel like they get really like fuzzy more quickly than the 4-ply, and I kind of like the texture in stockinette that the 4-ply yarn creates rather than the 2-ply, so I'm excited that this is a 4-ply sock yarn. Now, I am not interested in knitting socks right now, but if I want these for Christmas, I have to start them soon, so maybe this will force me to get back into knitting socks. I'm not really sure what pattern I'm going to use for this sock set yet. I'm thinking something definitely on the simpler side because there's a lot of variegation and I want the yarn variegation to shine rather than the texture. So if I don't do a vanilla sock, I would probably do something very simple, either with like knits and purls or maybe like a ribbed sock. Yeah, that's my one recent acquisition. And the last part of today's episode will be announcing the giveaway winners for the 2 books that I shared last week, including the Knitting for Olive book and the Knitivation Stitch Dictionary. So thank you guys so much for entering the giveaway. I have picked the winners. So the first winner is for the Knitivation Stitch Dictionary, and the winner is Manon C1888. So congratulations. Please contact me. Let me put my email here. So send me an email identifying yourself, and then we'll go from there. The book will be sent to you by Penguin Publishing, who did gift these books to me and is sponsoring the giveaway. And the winner of the Knitting for Olive book is the user Alex Cunningham-KD9QN. Alex, congratulations. Again, please contact me with my email and we will go from there. Again, same thing. The book will be sent to you by Penguin Publishing, who gifted me this book and is sponsoring the giveaway. So thank you guys so much for entering and commenting. It was really fun to read what you guys were interested in from all of the books. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.